Today I scratch built a DM screen for Dungeons & Dragons. Or anything really. It is fit with a dice tray, an initiative tracker, whiteboards, everything you could want, and it doubles as storage. So I'll be the first one to tell you I'm not the greatest when it comes to woodworking, but I can get there in the end. I started out with a piece of MDF which is 2mm thick, and I cut out 4 pieces that'll be the back pieces. And these pieces I had them at the size of an A4 sheet of paper, because that was roughly a good size for me. And because these pieces are so thin, 2mm thin, you can just cut it with an X-Acto knife. Just give it a couple passes and it will come off. For the walls, I cut 2cm tall walls out of 6mm thick MDF. You could use the same thickness MDF, I just had some of this, so I used some of this. I then totally forgot that I had a hand saw and started cutting this using an X-Acto knife as well. It's pretty tough. Hand saw, when I remembered that I had one, was much easier to get through that. But I just cut these pieces to fit as walls onto the basic backing piece. And here I just borrow some of Eileen's tacky glue to stick them on. I'm using Eileen's glue here because I don't really have enough clamps to clamp it down properly. If you had a bunch of clamps, you could use PVA glue real easy. But because tacky glue is more tacky, it sticks faster and you don't need to worry about clamping it all down. I do, however, still clamp it down. I then repeat that process 3 more times until I have 4 pieces of box. Half box? Topless boxes? The only problem is, because I'm terrible at woodwork, they are not straight, they're not flat, and there are huge gaps all over the place. So I come in with a hand planer? Sander? I clean up all of the edges with this thing, and I also sand them down, and then fill the gaps with some spackle. Before I get to that, however, I need to make the little dice tray that will fold out of this box. I start by making these little arms, like little levers, and then drilling a hole at the bottom of them, and then stick a huge piece of MDF inside that, and that will act as the bottom of the tray. And it folds in and out really nice. There's a little bit of a gap at the bottom, but we'll solve that coming up shortly. With the first piece of fold-out technology made, I start making the next one. Unfortunately, I lose some of the footage for this, but I start with a piece of dowel, I think it's 11 inches long, and I cut that down and then drill a hole into these top 2 pieces that I've mounted up here. And these are just 2 pieces of MDF offcuts that I've cut down to roughly the right size. I just drill a hole through there, I drill a hole through the piece of rod as well, and then secure that in place with a bolt. For actually tracking the initiative, I got a bunch of these clotheslines pegs. These little wooden pegs are the best for this because they are really easy to paint. And I'm just going to paint all of the pegs. I'm going to take them apart and then give them a spray paint in black. That way they don't look too out of place. I've then got this laminated piece of paper, and this is just a normal piece of paper that I've stained using tea. And I just cut it down to 1 inch by 3 inch squares, and this gives plenty of space to write names on the pegs using a wet erase or dry erase marker. In total, I make 7 of these, and you can even make custom ones for your characters and players in the game. It's now time for that drywall spackle I talked about earlier. This stuff is really great, once I get the lid off, to hide all of the mistakes in the entire thing. Any gaps that you've left, it seals it up and makes it look like one whole piece. Once all the spackle is dry on all of the pieces, I get to work with all of the little details. So I start out with the dice tray, I grab a piece of felt that will go on the inside, and then I measure using a scrap piece of paper what size I want the felt to be. You can see here, I have a little bit of excess hanging down the bottom, and that will cover that gap. And here you can see how it is like a separate piece that folds up. And once I cut it out of the felt, I'm then going to cut that fold off piece out of the piece of paper, and then cut the same sized piece out of a piece of chipboard. Then once the piece of cardstock is also painted black, I glue both of the pieces down. And you can see here how I glue them down, and I use the felt to connect all three pieces together. So now the dice tray is complete, there are also some other things that I want to include, like a magnetic whiteboard. So I have this magnetic whiteboard right here that I got off Amazon for a couple dollars, and it comes apart real easy. Apparently, it's just a piece of plastic that's clipped in and held in by hot glue. So I can very easily just take off the magnetic piece off the double corrugated cardboard that is in there. This process can be a bit rough. I'm not quite sure how I'd go about doing it again in the future. Just maybe cutting off all of the cardboard, or maybe letting it even soak in water to get all the cardboard off, because the metal does end up getting a bit bent. And just like the felt, I grab a scrap piece of paper and I mark out the rough size that will fit on the inside of the box, and then just transfer that size over to the pieces of the magnetic whiteboard. Once I cut it to size, check and double check, I grab some contact adhesive and apply it to both sides. Now, if you didn't have any contact adhesive, you could also use some super glue, Gorilla Glue, epoxy, hot glue would work well as well. Probably not PVA though, because PVA would not be able to catch it enough. Unless your metal doesn't get as bent as mine, then you could sit it on PVA pretty nicely. Once all of the interiors are nice and decorated and dried, and I don't really need to have them laying flat anymore, I'm going to go ahead and attach the hinges. I originally got 3 sets of hinges because I wanted all 4 pieces to be connected, but I found only connecting 2 is plenty, and then you can move around and you have plenty of space to adjust where things are sitting. And as well, you're not stuck with it being one huge piece. You can have it as 2 separate boxes as well. Once all of the hinges are in place and everything is kind of getting closer to being set up, I print off a bunch of these little DM cheat sheets that is meant to form a full DM screen. And I just use some sticky tack to stick the separate pieces on. And I've cut these into their modular columns that had all of their themes, like money, exploration, combat, all together. That way I can quickly glance or move them around if I don't like the position of them. And these, of course, are also laminated. I didn't exactly like the look of it just being all black, so I decided to paint a starry nebula on it as well, to throw back to my old dice box. Now, while this normally isn't going to be facing the player's bear, because I have maps hanging up in front of it, I think it just does a little bit to make it look a little bit more interesting, but not distracting. And here it is complete. You see I have a little pegboard as well for tracking monsters' hit points or spell slots and things like that. The whiteboard functions as intended. The magnetic functions of it are also pretty handy for sticking little notes up on the board if I'm out of sticky tack or don't have any with me. Normally I used to track initiative on just a whiteboard, but having it up here where everyone can see it plain as day is really helpful, really nice, and always in the limelight. The dice tray works really well. It all folds up really nicely, and the storage functionality is great. I even has these little M&M tubes for storing little mini tokens. And these all fit in here nice. And here you can see they just all fold up. You can store a bunch of things in here, and I think I'll even add some more things that will make their home known as the DM box. Closing the dice tray can be a bit of a pain, but I mean, you only close it really once a night, so it's not that bad. It does get caught on dice underneath the walls, but I mean, it's a worthwhile sacrifice just shaking it around a bit and pushing the dice back inside. And once that is all folded up, it sits into my portable DM case really easily as well. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you next week with something different.